So, thanks for coming. I'm Dr. Ekberg, and I'm trained as a chiropractor, but over the years, we've learned to address the whole person. If you want to get a person healthy, you have to look at it holistically. You have to address chemical, structural, and emotional. So today, I'm more of a overall healthcare practitioner, if you will. And I grew up in Sweden. I came to this country about 30 years ago the first time on a track scholarship. And I competed in decathlon for schools here at SMU, and I went to the Olympics competing for Sweden in 1992. And I finished ninth. And at the time, I thought I was really fit and healthy. But in retrospect, I know that I was really fit, but not so healthy. Just like everyone else, I was told to consume lots of carbohydrates. That was the rage at the time. So I ate 8,000 calories of carbs, and I supplemented heavily with chocolate and ice cream. And I burned it all off. So at the time I thought I was okay, but in retrospect I realized that I was setting myself up for trouble for decades to come. So when I was about 30, after my athletic career, I started having back pains, and they were to last for about 20 years, and they would be debilitating. Sometimes I'd be flat out for days at a time. And today I have mostly recovered. I used to have back pain, brain fog, acne, shoulder pain, knee pain, you name it. Today I have recovered from virtually all of that. I'm still improving, but healing is an ongoing process. But I have no back pain, I'm functioning, I'm healthier today at 53 than I've been in the last 15 years. And I'd like to talk today about diabetes. So for just a moment, I want to get a little bit extra serious, because sometimes people we don't have to be too serious because life is fun, but we do have to understand the gravity of what we're talking about. That these seminars and our YouTube channel are about saving lives. That a lot of people who think they're okay are not okay. 95% of people in this country died prematurely from something that could have been prevented. So think about that. If you visualize 20 people that you care for, 20 friends, relatives, loved ones, and then these are all nice, well-meaning people with families and kids and grandkids, and then you realize that 19 out of these 20 will die prematurely from something that could be prevented. And not only that, but they'll be suffering, they'll be on medication, they'll be under medical care, great expense, for years or decades needlessly. So that's what we're talking about. And these people, they have been lied to. They've been told that they're fine as long as they take their medication, as long as their symptoms and signs are controlled. But the truth is that they're not fine. All these people are dying and suffering not because they forgot to take their pills. They took their pills, but they're getting sicker and sicker. And this is happening to us as a nation. So that's kind of the preface that these things can be prevented, and we're going to talk about how that works. Imagine if you could just understand what we're talking about and help even half of those 20 people understand this and turn their lives around and start working toward health instead of treating disease. Think about how many lives you could impact and save. So let's dive into diabetes. So here's a nice little flyer posted by the American Diabetes Association. And today, diabetes will claim 200 lives. But not only that, today, diabetes will take 200 limbs. Diabetes is the leading cause of amputations. It's the leading cause of blindness, and it is preventable. 4,660 Americans will be diagnosed with diabetes today, And there are millions more that don't know that they have diabetes. In addition to 30 million people who have full-blown diabetes, there's another 86 million that have pre-diabetes. They're on their way there. And diabetes today will cost America $671 million in the next 24 hours. And that's not fixing the disease, that's just treating symptoms. So if we look at how this has developed, we know that genes have not changed in the last several tens of thousands of years. So if we look at the development from 1960, we know that genes certainly haven't changed since 1960. We started off here with 1 point something million. It has grown through the years, and you can see that this is not an encouraging trend. It's an exponential growth. Today we have 30 million documented cases. And if genes haven't changed, then it must be lifestyle. So they're always trying to blame things on genetics, but it's really a lifestyle that we need to look at. And let's talk about how carbohydrates work. Carbohydrates have not been around for tens of thousands of years, not in any quantity. They were introduced through agriculture a few thousand years ago. They haven't been processed at all until a couple of hundred years ago, and they haven't been hybridized and GMO and processed and bleached until the last few decades. So this is a new food. Our body doesn't know how to deal with it. So when you eat it, carbohydrates create excess blood sugar. With excess blood sugar, we get excess insulin. We get insulin activity that our system, our bodies were never designed for. When you have excess insulin, that results in a quick drop of blood sugar, and it ends up with hypoglycemia. Now, you have low blood sugar as a consequence of high blood sugar. And when you're hypoglycemic, you get irritable, you lose focus, you get tired, and you get what's called hangry. Now you get cravings, and what do you have cravings for? Well, of course, carbohydrates, which creates blood sugar, insulin, hypoglycemia, more cravings, and now we're stuck in a loop that basically has a drug involved. So it's very difficult to get out of this unless we drastically change something. So this is the short-term effects. What does it look like long-term? Long-term effects of carbohydrates, of course, blood sugar goes up and insulin goes up. But when this happens over a period of time, your body starts doing something called down regulation. So you have insulin receptors that respond to insulin in order to let the glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cells. And you have a certain number of these insulin receptors, but the more insulin you have, the more they're pushing their way through, and you don't need so many because there's so much insulin that a few receptors will do the trick. So now your body starts to down-regulate. The cell surface changes. So there's fewer and fewer receptors, and now you are developing insulin resistance because the insulin doesn't work the way it used to when you had more receptors. And if you have insulin resistance, then of course the pancreas has to make even more insulin because it's not working anymore. And now you get more down regulation and you're stuck in this loop. So you're developing insulin resistance. It gets worse and worse and worse. And now you're ending up with a beat up pancreas. It has to overwork all the time. And it gets less and less healthy because you're eating carbohydrates, which isn't the food that provides much nutrients. So over time you get pancreas failure and you get diabetes. So this is how this develops. It's not a disease, it's an adaptive process. This is an adaptation. Your body isn't stupid, it is only doing what it has to do, and in the long run, it just can't pull it off. It can do it for months and years, it can't do it for decades. So how do you turn this around? And with pancreas failure, of course, you get even more blood glucose to make this even worse. So how do you turn this around? Reversing diabetes, it is so simple, you could tell a child and they would get it. You cut back or cut off the carbohydrates. Now you get lower blood glucose, you need less insulin, and with less insulin, your body immediately starts upregulating again. It might take a few months, but the process begins immediately. Now, if you have more receptors, you are more sensitive to insulin. Now the pancreas makes less insulin, and we get more upregulation, and now we're not stuck, we're in a positive loop instead, and now we get a chance for the pancreas to recover. So these mechanisms are so well known, it's mind-blowing that we don't understand this as a culture. So here's what we can use to measure. This is the simplest, cheapest way. There are various insulin measurements, but this is a really good measure. It's called Hemoglobin A1c. So most people are familiar with a fasting glucose test. And that means you don't eat for overnight, you don't have breakfast, you go get your blood drawn. And that's what your blood sugar is when you're fasting, when you haven't eaten for a while. Well, that's not really useful because it doesn't tell you what it looks like most of the time. So with hemoglobin A1c, what happens is hemoglobin is a protein in your red blood cells. And the more sugar you have in your bloodstream, the more of it sticks to the hemoglobin. So you can measure how much of the hemoglobin has glucose stuck to it, and then you can estimate how much the average glucose is. So what this does, because a red blood cell lives somewhere between 3 and 4 months, this gives you an excellent measurement for how the average looks over a 3 to 4 month period. And diabetes is defined as anything over 6.5. When your hemoglobin A1c is 6.5 or over, you're classified as diabetic. Prediabetes is 5.7 and up to 6.5. Optimal, where we really want to be, if we eat a healthy diet, if we're functioning the way we're supposed to, we don't have blood sugar swings, we eat real food, meat, fat, vegetables, then we're going to be somewhere, this might be 85 to 90, but we have so few blood sugar swings that our average still stays between 90 and 100 on average. And in between there, between optimal and pre-diabetic, means that you're not doing perfect, you're starting to slip. You're starting to get some problems. You're starting to get some of the effects of insulin resistance and high blood sugar. And now for numbers, we mentioned before that this is 30 million people, but once we add the pre-diabetic, it's 114 million people. That's almost half the adults in the US that are pre-diabetic. And if we add in the ones who are slipping, I don't have an exact number for that, but based on what we see for the most part, I would say that it's at least 250 million people out of the US population. So there are very, very few people who are in the optimal range. And if you're in here and you start working on it and you lower it even by a few tenths, you will improve all kinds of things in your health. So let's just look at this slide real quick. We showed you some numbers. Diabetes, #1 cause of amputations, #1 cause of blindness, etc. #1 cause of neuropathy. And this is published by the American Diabetes Association. And the American Diabetes Association recommends a diet that causes diabetes. This has been proven. Their official guideline says that, oh, you have to have lots of carbohydrate. And they recommend 45 to 65% carbohydrate in the diet. That means that they want you to eat about 300 grams of carbohydrate every day on about a 2,000 calorie diet. So again, let's flash back to here. Carbohydrates, blood glucose, insulin downregulation, insulin resistance, pancreas failure, diabetes. Carbohydrates cause diabetes. Removing carbohydrates starts reversing diabetes. And this is a clinical fact. Hundreds of thousands of people who have tried this know this is true. And it is very, very consistent and predictable. So we need to start understanding this. So let's talk about some of the deeper issues. Besides carbohydrate, how do we restore the body when it is degenerated to some degree? So first of all, signs and symptoms are just messages. And it's not a message, a symptom, a pain. It's not the problem, it's telling us of a problem. Just like if we're out driving and we get certain indicators from our car, these lights are not the problem, they're telling us of a problem. And if we ignore the problem, or if we do like any handyman would do, put a piece of duct tape on it, how many people think that would be a good idea? Didn't think so. Because you understand in a car that if you cover up the message, you haven't really improved anything. It's still exactly the same problem, you're just not aware of it. So you cannot create health by covering up symptoms any more than you can brighten a room by covering up the darkness. Unfortunately, the ultimate cover-up is to the tune of $3.2 trillion. That's our healthcare system. That is what they are designed and trained to do. And this was in 2015. It was more in 16, 17, and it will be more again this year. And that's $10,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country. If that money was well spent, we could justify it if we were the healthiest people on the planet. But it turns out that we rank 37th out of 37 industrialized nations when it comes to health. So whatever all that money is getting us, except ruining the economy, it is not getting us health. And it is skyrocketing completely out of control because we're not addressing causes. We have 5% of the world's population, we take 55% of the world's drugs. We take 80% of all the narcotics in the world. Do we have less pain? No. We get more and more and more pain every year. The number one cause of death, 1 million deaths a year, is our healthcare system. So this is based on research from medical journals in both the United States, the top medical journals, United States, Great Britain, and they're aware of these numbers. Drug side effects, hospitalizations, unnecessary surgeries, complications, adds up to about 1 million deaths a year. That's the same as if we had 6 jumbo jets crashing every day with no survivors, 365 days a year. Would you be real excited about buying a ticket, go flying tomorrow? Not so much. But we keep going back to the healthcare system because we don't understand what they're good at and what they're not suited for. So that's what we're trying to help you understand, that the medical system is for emergencies, but they have no tools for you to get healthy. Health is a personal responsibility, and there are health care doctors that are holistically minded that can help you, assist you, guide you in getting healthy. But the mainstream medical system is not that. They are for emergencies. If you break a bone, if you have diabetic coma, if you have appendicitis, if you crack your skull open, go to the emergency room. But if you have diabetes or high blood pressure or a chronic knee pain, they have nothing for you. You have to heal the body. The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest patients in the care of the human frame, in a proper diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. So prevention means you build up the body before you have a symptom. When you have a symptom, you already have the disease. It's already too late for prevention. So all the screenings that they do for mammograms and this and that, early detection, it's not prevention. It's just catching it early, which is better than catching it late, but prevention is what prevents disease. So health is based on your autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system has a passive level, which all function in the body is on a passive level, which is bones, cartilage, connective tissue. There's active tissue, skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and there's a regulating level with brain and nervous system. So everything in your body that you don't think about is handled for you. It doesn't happen automatically. It's done for you by your autonomic nervous system. So 1 billion bits of information every second goes to digesting food and circulating blood and beating your heart and regulating pH and hormones and neurotransmitters and on and on and on. And every bit of it depends on how well the brain can process these things. So in chiropractic, the brain controls everything, and the brain has feedback from receptors. So all the body parts have receptors, and they give the brain feedback, 1 billion bits of information per second. And this is what informs the brain. Every receptor provides a piece of information that gives the brain a true picture of reality. And with a true picture, the brain can do a good job of controlling. But if we lose some of this feedback, now the brain doesn't have a true picture, and we're going to start having issues. So the sum total of this is called regulation. The better it works, the healthier you are. The more imbalances we start to get, the more disease and pain and symptoms we start having. So chiropractic works by finding out where there is an imbalance, stimulating receptors, and restoring that balance, giving the brain a truer picture of what the world looks like, and then the brain can start playing a better game. But what if there's something else? What if it's not just the receptors? What if there's something screwing up the signal on the way? So let's talk about that next. Everything's controlled by the brain, but the brain depends on a bunch of different vital organs, such as heart and thyroid and kidneys and liver and so forth. And the health of all these organs depend on how healthy each cell is that makes it up. So if the cells aren't healthy, obviously the organs can't be healthy. But these cells, they wear out over time. So the body that you're sitting there with today is 90% different than the body you had last year. 90% of those cells have been turned over because you have a blueprint in the nucleus called DNA that allows you to make a new cell. But here's the big question. What are the factors that determine if the new cell is better or worse than the old one? Because if it's better, you're healing. If it's worse, you're degenerating. And that's what we're seeing with most of the population, is every generation of cells is a little bit worse. And in 7 years, you replace every single cell in your body. So how would you like to start making better cells for the next 7 years? What kind of body would you like to have next time around? Okay? Turns out there's only two factors that determine if this cell is going to be better or worse. One is toxicity and one is deficiency. So deficiency means that the cell has a need. It has to have something, but if it's deficient, it means it's not getting it. Toxicity means the cell's trying to do something, but there's a stressor, there's an interference, there's something that's getting in the way of that cell doing its job. And these are the only two factors that determine how that cell is doing. The cell can be deficient in activation, use it or lose it. If you don't activate the cell, it's going to go away. If you activate the cell, you have to give it fuel. And fuel, that's the calories, the carbohydrates, fat, and protein. And some people think that that's all it takes, that nutrition is about calories. You even see it posted in restaurants. This recommendations based on a nutrition of 2,000 calories. What does that have to do with anything? Because we are overfed and undernourished. Because we're not getting the genuine replacement parts. Genuine replacement parts is the stuff that you need to build a new cell. Whole food has everything in it that you need to make new cells. It has the enzymes, the vitamins, the minerals, the coenzymes, the cofactors, the phytofactors, the essential amino acids, the essential fatty acids. It's a complete package that's destroyed by food processing. So if you're going to make a new cell, do you want genuine replacement parts or you want cheap knockoffs? That's what I thought. So processed food are cheap knockoffs. You cannot build a healthy body. You cannot sustain optimal life with knockoffs. And then you need some peace because stress interferes. You can't heal in a war zone. Your body needs some peace and quiet to pull that off. So stressors, those are things that interfere with the function, with the replication, with the mechanisms, with the metabolism of the cell. Those are allergies, metal toxicity, chemical toxicity, immune challenges, scars, and electromagnetic fields. So everything in your body is about signals, and all of these things will change, they will alter how signals are processed and balanced in the body. And most of these are new. We haven't had metals and chemicals and electromagnetic fields until very, very recently. And the reason that the body succumbs to allergies and immune challenges is that the cell gets weakened by all this processed food. Because if we don't give it genuine replacement parts, it's going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And these are going to become more and more and more of a problem until we get everything kind of backed up and we are toxic. So how do we figure this out? So now you know how health works. You know the factors that the only two factors that affect the cell is toxicity and deficiency. You can be deficient in activation or nutrients or peace.
They're saying they need you louder.
So turn the volume up. Okay, excuse me. Testing, testing, testing,
About 3 decibel.
testing. There. Okay.
Right.
All right, thanks for pointing that out. And so the things that get people sick today are different than 100 years ago. 100 years ago, we died from diphtheria and typhoid fever and starvation, etc. But today, we don't die from those things. We die from deficiency and toxicity. The world has changed more in the last 50 years than it has in the previous 50,000, and the game has changed. We have to start understanding the new rules of the game so that we can keep up with this. So what's the solution? How do we figure out what you're missing, and how do we figure out what you're toxic with? Tracy, you want to come up here? So we're going to do a little demonstration here. And this is called nutrition response testing, for those of you who haven't seen it. So please stand right there.
I've got it really zoomed in, so you're out.
All right. So this is based on muscle testing. So we're going to talk about what muscle testing is first and show you. So if you hold your arm out for me, I'm going to push down and you match my pressure. So there, it's not a strength test. I'm pushing on the bone is held up by a muscle, the muscle is controlled by a signal from the brain. And I'm starting with an ounce of pressure. I build up to about a pound, and all I'm looking for is a solid feeling. That's called a locked muscle. Now, if you move your right leg forward, and we push on this arm again, and match for me, and now we don't get a lock. She can try really, really hard, but there's not going to be a lock in that muscle because that leg is sending a different signal. This is different feedback. That's part of the billion bits of information. So when one leg goes forward, the brain interprets that as walking because that's what's usually going on when a leg goes forward. Would you agree? And if one leg goes forward, the opposite arm is supposed to go forward. We don't walk like this, and that's foreign to the brain. So when we try to put the same leg and arm forward, the brain says, hey, that makes no sense. I've never done this. There's not a single pathway in my neural circuits that recognizes what that is.
What do you call that?
Muscle test? Locked muscle?
Muscle test.
Yes, okay. So now switch legs. So this is called a gait reflex, a cross crawl pattern. And now when we push on this arm, we get a perfect lock because this makes sense to the brain. If we try the opposite side, we get an unlock. If we switch legs, we get a lock. So everything that happens in your body is a result of brain signals, and everything that the brain does is a result of what signals it receives. Does that picture make sense? So now we know what the muscle test is. So now we're going to check a few things. And start with a lock, and then we work our way through. So every place that I'm touching is a different area of the body that can have problems.
Since I've been here for 2 years, I don't have a lot of problems.
Correct. So we'll see if we find anything at all. Because things change. We have things changing every day as the body is adapting. All right, we found one. So we have the transverse colon. Maybe you ate something, and okay. So the transverse colon, now normally if you check somebody, we'll find 10 or 20 things wrong, but since Tracy has been on a program for quite some time, we only found a single thing, so it could be something she ate the other day. So let's try some multizyme and Enzicor and Zypan. So first we ask the body where the problem is. It doesn't tell us what the problem is. We're just locating where it is, and then we're thinking if it's part of the colon, then it might be a food. And hold. Okay, and that makes no difference. get lactic acid yeast. Oh, no difference. So right now we're trying digestive enzymes. But digestive enzymes usually work a little bit higher up in the digestive tract, so none of those work. So here's a prebiotic yeast. Oh. And that works very nicely. So this is a mycelium yeast that prepares the soil. So a lot of people take probiotics, but let's see, lactic acid, 88. Lactans. So here's a probiotic, and if we test that, we don't get a change. And most people keep throwing probiotics down their gut and hoping that some will stick. But probiotics are like seeds. And if you throw them on concrete, nothing's going to happen. It doesn't matter how much seed you throw. If it doesn't have a place to grow, it's not going to do you any good. Whereas if you get something that prepares the soil, something that works at an earlier level, all of a sudden we get a result. So that's the beauty of nutrition response testing, is we check various different reflexes, and then your body is very, very specific in knowing what it needs to fix that. And then with some experience, we can pull the right things and just keep going until we have a solution. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So how can that work? Well, your body is an electromagnetic system. It's an electromagnetic field. And the entire universe is energy, frequency, and vibration. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in those terms. So if your body is energy, then we have to have a tool that can evaluate that, and that's what muscle testing is. And everything, including those little pills in the bottle, have a little bit of energy. So if you hold it and you are energy, then that energy is going to interact. It's going to be processed by your electromagnetic field. So in the end, what this results in, our goal is to design personal clinical nutrition. So with this, we can ask your body, what's the first thing we have to handle? What's the second thing we have to handle? We can find out what the cause, what the solution is, and then we move on. And even if we have someone new who has 20 different things going on, then typically we only have to handle the roadblocks. We only have to handle the big stuff, and then the body takes care of the rest. And how do we know this works? Because we've had, in this office, we've had hundreds of people that have tried absolutely everything else. They've been to 20 different doctors. They've been on every therapy known to man until they come in here and they get better. And between all the practitioners that use this, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people. And these are not the easy cases, they're last resort cases. So there's two doctors in our office here. We're both licensed chiropractors. We're both nutrition response testing practitioners. And when we say nutrition, it is different than just about every other nutrition in the world that you can find. The vast majority, 99% of everything sold, is synthetic vitamins. So what we have is whole food supplements. They're not synthesized. They are the complete product made by standard process. Because of that, it's safe. There are no side effects. Okay. So that concludes what we have to say about this, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
So someone did say congratulations on your first live stream. They loved it,
Thank you.
and they were able to get their HbA1c down to 4.5, and it's probably lower now.
Oh, wow.
So say that out loud so that, in case they don't hear them.
Okay, so we just got a compliment from a viewer who said that they followed this and they had gotten their A1C all the way down to 4.5 by following these principles. So there you go. Any other questions?
Mm.
All right, so thank you so much for attending, and we'll stay on here for a few minutes if there's anything else you want to chat about. Thank you.
So tomorrow,
What's that?
do you have another one tomorrow?
I do. What's the topic?
You can't go.
So we'll do another one of these tomorrow, and it's going to be at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, and the topic will be weight loss. We're going to talk about how weight loss is more than just calories and exercise, and the people who have tried everything and are really frustrated, they know what I'm talking about. That there are several different factors and things that can interfere, so we're going to cover what those are.
Yeah, so Spike just asked when will be the next live?
Yeah. So tomorrow, Friday, June 8th at 12:30. All right, thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.